Good afternoon in New York. Good evening in Srebrenica, in the rest of Europe, in Africa, and welcome whatever time of day or night for all who are joining us from the rest of the world today. I'm Dr. Yael Danieli, founder and executive director of the International Center for the Study, Prevention, and Treatment of Multigenerational Legacies of Trauma, ICMGLT for short. Thank you for joining our webinar today. The International Center for Multigenerational, the International Center for Multigenerational Legacies of Trauma. Today's webinar is held in remembrance of the siege of Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Acknowledged as the longest military siege in modern history, the siege of Sarajevo continued for 1,425 days, and 11,441 people, including 1,601 children, were killed in daily shelling and snipering by Bosnian Serb forces. Participants will discuss childhood and intergenerational, multi-generational legacies of the siege of Sarajevo from both the personal and multidimensional, multi-professional perspective. I will not spend time on introducing myself, but just to tell you that as the moderator today, I'm a clinical psychologist, victimologist, traumatologist, and psychohistorian. I devoted much of my career to studying, preventing, and treating multi-generational impacts of massive trauma. To victims' rights, to reparative justice, the rights of future generations, and to articulating history as it is lived, rather than only as it is written about. Our first speaker today will be Amina Durakovic. Amina is a Bosniak psychologist, researcher, psychotherapist in training, and member of the ICMGLT Advisory Council, who is currently working as a school psychologist. She was born in 1995 and is a descendant of Bosnian war survivors. Her research is focused on multi-generational trauma, collective identities, and memories. So far, she co-authored 2 books and numerous scientific and popular articles. The next presenter will be Merima Ražanica, an educational activist coordinator at War Childhood Museum. She co-developed new educational materials for the museum's peace education program, facilitates discussions, and teaches about war, childhood, tolerance, and acceptance. She has created interactive museum guides for children and adults that aim at fostering healthy and open intergenerational dialogue. Because her childhood was also affected by the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina, she is intrinsically motivated to explore interactive and participatory forms of remembrance that go beyond traditional memory practices. Next will be Jamil Hodžić, a senior video editor at Al Jazeera English. He has more than 20 years of experience in media and television. He was only 9 years old when the siege of Sarajevo started. Being a war survivor, his experiences inspired him to launch the Sniper Alley project in 2019. The project's mission is to find photos of Jamil's older brother who was killed by a Serb sniper when Jamil was only 12. It is actually up to you if, Jamil, you wanted to speak after Amina. I think maybe that should be, Amina, you will tell us.
You can, Jamil can go, actually. I don't really mind. I think all of us will have the opportunity to talk, so yes.
That's okay. And then last but not least is Amina Hadjiomerovic. She's a PhD student at the School of Global, Urban and Social Studies at RMIT University. She will tell you what it is. She is currently finishing her dissertation on the sociocultural impact of the unresolved issue of the missing persons from the Bosnian genocide on everyday lives, social identities, memories, and migration patterns of the surviving families in the diaspora. Amina Durakovic, you will be the first, but I just wanted to share with everyone that our webinars normally have this introduction, then of course the 10-minute presentation by each one of the wonderful people I just presented to introduce to you. Then they will have a short time of dialogue among themselves. And then, please, dear audience, we will have a question and answer and discussion with everyone in the audience who cares to participate. At the very end, I will ask each one of the participants to give their what we call last word. Amina Durakovic, my dear, please begin.
Okay, let me just share my screen. But in the meantime, I just wanted to say that I am very grateful for this opportunity to talk about what happened in Sarajevo, because we live in a time where Bosnian genocide denial is rampant, and we have these attempts at creating alternative narratives and rewriting history. So it is very important to talk about this, because if we don't tell our story, somebody else will do it for us. So I wanted to show you Sarajevo. This is a photo of Sarajevo for those who haven't seen it. It's just a small bit.
Sarajevo. Yes.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, I know. So I wanted to show a little bit of just how beautiful the city is and how rich in culture it is, because you can see the buildings from the Ottoman Empire era, from Austro-Hungarian era, from the communist era, and up to these modern times. Sarajevo has actually quite a rich history dating back to almost Neolithic times, but I do not have much time to talk about that. I don't know if I'm going to do any justice to the siege in 10 minutes, but I will try. Sarajevo, the world looked at Sarajevo for 3 times in the 20th century. First time being in 1914, when the Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie were assassinated. This event is widely recognized to be an excuse to start a World War I. The next time was in 1984, when Sarajevo hosted Winter Olympic Games. We are very proud of our Olympic heritage, and it is such a fond memory for us. And unfortunately, the third time was during the siege of Sarajevo, which lasted from 1992 to 1996. Most people actually talk about 1992 to 1995 due to the fact that the Dayton Peace Agreement was signed in 1995, but the siege was officially lifted on February 29th, 1996, when the reintegration of different parts of the city started. So that means that Sarajevo was under siege for 1,425 days, and it is widely recognized as the longest siege in modern European history through the 20th century. It was besieged first by the Yugoslav People's Army and subsequently by the Army of Republika Srpska, which is also very important to notice because there are attempts to deny and to minimize the guilt of the Army of Republika Srpska. And on average, more than 300 shells struck Sarajevo every day, and targets such as schools, hospitals, and homes were not spared. Actually, Serbs targeted places where they knew a lot of people would gather. They were aiming for maximum kill. So, for example, funerals had to be held during the night. So they wouldn't be seen by the snipers or by the other soldiers. Also, groups of children playing together were targeted. People who waited to get some water also were targeted because water, electricity, heating, all of that was cut off during the siege. So people had to go to these spots where they knew there would be water and then bring water back home. This is actually a map of the siege. As you can see, Sarajevo is located in a valley surrounded by mountains and hills. And during that time, you can see the thick red line is actually where the actual military line was, and where the Serbian army positioned their tanks and other weapons. And yes, the only way out of Sarajevo was actually a tunnel that was built in 1993, which went under the Sarajevo airport and connected the Free Bosnian territory and Sarajevo, which allowed medical supplies and food and people like visiting and coming in and out of Sarajevo. And that is really, and there's this amazing aspect of this, because these mountains around us, they're still such a reminder of what happened. Because, for example, in my experience, when I climb at Mount Trebević, which is a mountain that overlooks directly at Sarajevo, when I climb there, I have this discussion with my parents or whomever I am with. And we usually say, oh, this is the place where they killed us from. So they almost had Sarajevo as if on the palm of their hand. So I discussed this issue. I discussed this thought actually with other people, and they felt the same. So it is a small part of our collective trauma, and it's our multi-generational legacies, and everything around us seems to be a reminder of that. When it comes to numbers, as you said, around 11,500 people were killed, of whom 1,600 were children. 50,000 people were seriously or not so seriously injured. And the record number of shells in just one day was 3,777, which happened on July 22nd, 1993. It means that roughly one grenade fell on the city every 20 seconds. And it is estimated that the Serbs used around 500,000 shells during the siege in an attempt to destroy the city and its inhabitants. Aside from killing people, Serbs attempted urbicide and culturicide as well, because all of the major historical sites were targeted, such as mosques, cathedrals, synagogues, city hall, libraries, everything was at least damaged, if not destroyed completely. And as I wanted to, these massacres, as you can see, the three most covered massacres during the siege were massacre in Vase Miskina, or the Breadline massacre, the first Markala massacre, and the second Markala massacre. As I said, they specifically targeted places where a lot of people would gather. And Markala is actually a marketplace, still running today. I wanted to bring these massacres because there is so much false information about these massacres still running today, and the false propaganda actually started during the siege, during the aggression against Bosnia and Herzegovina. And when they defended themselves by saying, "Oh, Bosniaks killed their own people. It was an inside job by the Army of Republika Bosnia and Herzegovina." So it is very important to know the facts, to know the truth of what actually happened there. And the sad part is that this propaganda actually had succeeded in the part of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which that is inhabited mainly by Serbs, mainly Republika Srpska. Actually, one of my colleagues did a research on this topic, and she explored different narratives that are present amongst youth, Bosniak youth and Serbian youth. And she found out that even though these people, the students and the children, they weren't alive during the siege, but they had these narratives, and they lived them and they believed them. And they actually, in an interview, they said, "Oh, Markala was an inside job, so Bosniaks killed their own people and then blamed Serbs." So this actually shows how much, how far can that propaganda reach? Almost 30 years after that. And when it comes to justice, 4 persons have been convicted before the ICTY, and the mechanism for crimes committed during the siege of Sarajevo, namely Stanislav Galić, Dragomir Milošević, Radovan Karadžić, Ratko Mladić. 1 person was actually acquitted, Momčilo Perišić, and 2 accused passed away before the verdict could be handed down. Slobodan Milošević, the former president of Serbia, and Đorđe Đukić. So, as I said, it is very important to talk about the facts, and that's why I'm so grateful for every opportunity that I have to talk, that I have to talk about this. And I dedicate this presentation to my late cousin Mersid, who was actually killed during the siege, and all of the other children killed during the siege of Sarajevo, such as Jamil's brother and every other kid. So I hope that I did my best. I did my best actually to try and put these little facts in a 10-minute presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I know how difficult it is. And because you ended up with that picture, I think, and dedicating it to the kids. Jamil, would you please go next? I think it's a better, it's more integral to the setup right now. Jamil, please go ahead.
Just before I start, I would like to thank everyone for inviting me for this talk. And let me just share. Do you see what I
Yes,
see?
we do.
So I'll try to sum it up, because my story, the way I started the Sniper Rally project was writing my story. Only reading my story takes around 5 minutes, so I'll try to sum it up. My brother was killed on the 3rd of May in 1995 by a Serb sniper while he was playing tennis. I was there, and maybe 15 other children. As many other kids from all around the Bosnia, we don't have photos from that period, simply because you didn't have means to do it, you didn't have money, you didn't have camera. And for almost 25 years, I was searching for a photo of me and my brother from that period while my brother was still alive. So I wanted to have something. Because the last photo of two of us we have is from 1991. One thing that I noticed while doing this project, just to give you some context, most of these kids who were killed during the war and their book of death, maybe 50% of them and their photos is the photo that was done before the war, in front of their alphabet in their schools. So even that photo is not their photo; is the photo from school portrait, as you would say. So even when your kid is dead, you want to put a memorial for your child. You use a photo from before the war, and some of these kids, killed kids. Their info says they are 17-year-old, but the photo is when he was 14. And lots of people, especially Serb propagandists and fascists online, they say that's not the kid, he doesn't have 17 or whatever. So as I was looking for a photo of my killed brother, I came up with the idea of a Sniper Alley project. But I never wanted to talk about myself because this is not about myself, it's about all of us. But in order to start something, you have to start from your own story and from your own life. That was very difficult, I have to say. I don't like to complain, but it took me maybe 8 months to write a final draft. It was like 15 versions of my story, as I called it on a website. Whoever goes to my website or our website can see my story in 8 different languages. So the main goal of this project is to find, identify, and archive photos taken in Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina during the war, the period from 1992 till 1996, as Amina said, because for me, the siege kind of finished and the war finished when Amel was killed, to be honest. That's May 1995. And for a long time, I was afraid to say that I actually don't remember Srebrenica. I don't remember Markele, second Markele. I don't remember Kapja in Tuzla. And I never shared this with anyone because I don't know, we should know our history. And I was thinking that I'm not cold, but I felt guilty for not knowing it. And to go back to 2019, when I started the project, I started reading more. And every time you share something or you want to write about something, you have to check your facts and check your details to be correct. And then I aligned the timeline in my head, and I see that so many people got killed after my brother. And I didn't feel that way. I felt like the war was over. I remember playing in the neighborhood, and when the Serbs would shell our neighborhood, I wouldn't go home. For me, it was like almost as like, who cares? I mean, Amel is dead and they cannot harm me anymore. So when I started the project in 2019, we had only 5 galleries of world-renowned photographers. From 2 of them, I had permission to use their photos, and 3 of them are two are dead, and 1 was very difficult to find. So I took liberty and used their photos in order to get more photographers. So it started really slow because I was anonymous, so to say. You would have to go to my website, read my story, and kind of get interested in the topic. So many people didn't understand. So many people didn't have time to help. But by the time, within 1 year, I would say we had 50 galleries. And I thought to myself, that's it, that's amazing. But as time was going by, I collected 320 names in my database. And as of now, we have 111 galleries on the website with hundreds of photos, if not thousands. In all honesty, I never counted them properly. In that process of collecting photos, I kind of started collecting different stories. And so many people now, grown-up people, kids from these photos, they got recognized. And many of them, I would say they want to stay anonymous, and that's why I cannot share, or I don't want to share their photos. But in the search of a photo of myself or my brother or my mom, she was working in a hospital during the war, I found hundreds of photos of other kids. And many of these kids never read my story or don't know anything about me. They would email me or text me, and they would say, you have no idea what you did for me. And then I would have to introduce myself, the project, and they would see that there is a bigger mission, bigger than myself. I have a personal mission to find a photo of my brother, but it was never about him. So to say, he was the galvanizing force, but not the final goal, because I think from this perspective, into 4 years of this project, I think this will never finish, because we never know what we're going to find in the future and when some kids from these photos will decide to speak up. So in 2021, with lots of emails, lots of patience, I finally found or tracked down a photographer who took a photo of my neighborhood. And as we were exchanging emails, he confessed later on that at first he didn't know what I wanted from him, and he had photos somewhere in his attic. He had to buy the scanner, he had to scan, and I'll skip through because we don't have much time to go through all of his photos. He was sending me emails with like 10 photos per email. And as he was sending it, I would be publishing it on Facebook, and people would start recognizing themselves. And at some point, he entered my neighborhood, my street, my house. But there were no photos of me or my family. And I told him, you are in my neighborhood now. And one of the emails, maybe 5th or 6th, he sends me an email, and first photo is me. And my reaction was disbelief. I had to send it to my wife and to my mom to confirm. And I know it's me, but I don't believe it's me. And I started shaking. I started crying. And I was happy and sad at the same time. As I was driving home, I would stop at the signal and I would cry. I had to cover my eyes because at that moment, my life, as I wanted that, was back. So that was the period when my brother was alive. So my mind is perceiving this photo in a different way. For some people, they can't look at the photo because I'm in a really bad clothes. We are poor. It's war, but my brain operates differently. So as I reach home, I have my dinner and I receive another email, and the first photo in that email is the group photo of my neighborhood, and the boy in the middle in this blue shirt, turquoise shirt, is my brother.
Wow.
And not all of us are looking at the camera, but he does. And at that moment, I couldn't stop crying. And the first thing I did, I emailed photographer, Thomas James Hurst.
Who is the photographer?
Thomas James Hurst. It says in the top bottom right corner, American photographer. And I felt obliged that he should know. He's the one who should know first. In this photo, I'm on the right corner, but this is a closer look of my brother, and this is me. I don't remember this photo. Speaking of trauma, speaking of surviving the siege, I remember this toy I'm holding. It's a handmade wooden toy. I don't remember my clothes. I don't remember anything from this photo. But what's really interesting with the photo is that it was made just 5 meters away from the place where my brother was killed 2 years after the photo. So this photo was made in June 1993. So 30 years photo. I'm 10 years old in this photo. All of these kids are alive except my brother. So when I see it, I still see it as a triumph. Imagine one mortar attack and we all could be dead. So at least something, and all of these kids now have some kind of a memory or some kind of detail from previous life. As I was speaking, I don't remember the clothes or the photographer or anything. This is the photo I was telling you about that came before the photo of my brother. Again, I don't remember this cat. I don't remember anything. But the photo of my friend, I remember his shoes. I remember his haircut. I remember the place we collected water. I sent it to him. And first thing he said, "Who is this?" So it shows you how we didn't forget, but we are not aware of how we looked like. I don't know. It's really difficult to explain. I have thousands of these photos, and I have hundreds of stories that I didn't want to share because I don't have permission. I can share my photo, and I can share photo of my friends and my family. So as I said, 111 galleries in the system, and many more to come. And we have no idea what these photographers have in their archive. It takes time. It takes, some people don't have scanners, some don't have time. Some of them, they have to find it. At least 40 of these photographers are pending. They promised they will do it, but we are still waiting. Some of them are dead, sadly. So with the simple personal mission, I think I accomplished to make so many others happy, if we can say happy, because for a long time I thought I'm the only one who was longing for the siege, because my brain remembers that period as a period of my brother being alive. I have photos from his funeral, but he's dead there, and I don't have any pleasure at looking at these photos. So it might sound really terrible, but for me, that's a really happy period. Even when they were, I myself was shot at by Serb snipers 3 times, and I survived. And of course, I'm happy for it. But back then, I was like making fun of it. So to conclude, if we can conclude at least this presentation, I took liberty and used your motto and a quote from your website is our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, a month, or a year. It's a struggle of a lifetime. So what I know now and the way I speak now most probably is different than I spoke in 2019 or even 10 years ago. So time will tell and will show how I change with this project and how I perceive this peace or this situation we have 30 years after the siege. I hope I kind of summed it up correctly for you, and later on we can discuss some more. So thank you very much for listening.
As you said, time keeps going, and we will keep going with you. So we keep together on not only remembering the time, but learning from it. And thank you so much. I'm sort of too moved to be intellectual right now, but we will get to a more conceptual discussion.
Thank you.
When we get to the discussion. But you touched upon so many of the essentials of memory. So Merima, you teach about memory. You're also remember too.
Yes.
Go ahead, dear. Go ahead.
Yes, I remember I was born in 1991 in January, so my memories start at around 1993, end of 1993, start of 1994. I work, as you said previously, at the War Childhood Museum as the Educational Activities Coordinator. And yeah, I'm glad to join the discussion later on, but first I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to present the War Childhood Museum's work and my own work. And I want to thank the previous two speakers, Amina, for giving a great introduction into the general theme that we are talking about today, and to Jamil, whom I empathize so much, as I have also lost a brother during the war. So I'm going to share my presentation. I'm going to start by just telling you a bit about the War Childhood Museum. So the War Childhood Museum is an independent, youth-led, human-centered museum that is dedicated exclusively to presenting the childhoods affected by armed conflicts. It developed from the crowdsourced book, War Childhood, and was opened in Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, 7 years into its research and development phase. So the museum's crowdsourced collection consists out of 5,000 personal objects and hundreds of hours of oral history testimonies. So the museum was opened in 2017, but its story started a bit earlier than that, with the War Childhood book, as I said, which you can see at the back of my background. So in 2010, Jasminko Halilovic, who is the founder of the museum, decided to ask his peers, so people who were like him, children during the siege of Sarajevo, to answer this question that you can see on your screens on a web page he created specifically for this purpose. So the question was, what was a war childhood for you? So he limited the responses to 160 characters per person and received more than 1,500 responses from that many individuals whose childhoods have been affected by the siege. And this includes, I believe, Jamil, your own response in the book. The short memories that people shared shed light onto different aspects of this very multi-layered and complex experience, covering topics of schooling during the war, finding the food during the siege, shelters, personal losses, wounding, everyday life, play, humanitarian aid, and so on. And all of this was shared from a very personal perspective that brings history to life in a way, quotation marks.
Mary, my dear, look at the slide. Is this a slide you want to have now? Is it moving okay?
What was a war childhood for you?
I don't see anything besides what was a childhood for you.
Yes, yes, that's the slide.
Okay, thank you. I was just checking. Thank you.
Yeah. So here are a few memories from the book now.
Right.
I wanted my own loaf to eat all in one go if I felt like it, shared by Vedran, who was born in 1983. Bathing out of a 5-liter water can on the balcony and not even getting my fair share, shared by Masha. I remember the night Dad said, "Mom is dead." I remember the words, "Your dad is dead." Damned war. So after publishing this book in 2013, the author came to the realization that many individuals have saved personal items from this period of their lives, which were connected to certain important experiences, memories they had, emotions they felt during this time. So these objects were of great emotional value for them. And their stories were representing very specific historical event, an armed conflict, as well as their own personal account of how this historical event affected their lives and the lives of their families. So it became clear that with these objects being in existence and saved for such a long time, it became clear that there was an imminent need for a permanent space that would preserve the numerous objects and personal stories, memories that individuals have saved and were willing to share about their childhood spent in war. So these were objects of personal use, like toys or clothes, diaries, photographs, a wallet, a canister, a piece of clothing, drawing, anything that was connected to a certain important experience. People just held on to these objects. They were so valuable for them. And so the museum was envisioned as a space which will preserve these objects and stories and share them with the public, with the aim of educating a broad audience on the effects of armed conflict on children and their lives by presenting this multi-layeredness and the complexity of their experiences, but also by shedding light onto the children's resilience and strength. So this is one object from our exhibition now on your screens that you can see. It's a Lego house donated to museum by one participant who said that he used to play with it every day under the table in the kitchen, which seemed like the safest place in the house. And that it was these Lego bricks which represented everything that they couldn't have, because they would play the outside world. They would play that they were going to visit their family, their friends. They would play that they have cars and they're visiting their mom and dad, they're grown-ups. So the story, the memory he shared is called The World We Imagined. And it was with this house. So museum as a space presents a very unique perspective, very often overlooked or not represented at all, the perspective of children in armed conflicts. When we are reading, when anyone is reading or watching documentaries, learning from a history book about war, we are usually met with the perspective of adult, be it adult civilians, active participants in the conflict, politicians, historians, but very rarely we would read the perspective of children. Their agency in owning their own stories and narrative is very often taken away, and they are presented either solely as victims or passive observers who don't have the capacity to understand, to reflect, to talk about this experience. I was told this throughout my whole life, and even today. Oh, what do you know? Oh, you don't remember. Oh, you were too young to understand. But I have grown up and I have since learned a lot, and I do remember, and I remember the worst moments of it, including when my family was told that my brother has died. So people do not understand how much hurt they are causing by excluding young people from these conversations and just taking away their understanding altogether. So they're seen kind of as unreliable witnesses, let's call it that, and they are taken out of the conversation. So for these reasons, this perspective of children shared by the museum's collection is of immense importance, and especially in the educational activities of the museum, because children going through our educational activities can very easily connect to the themes and personal histories shared by their peers whose childhoods have been or still are affected by armed conflicts. These stories just become so much more tangible and relatable when they are shared by somebody who is their age, who maybe has the same thing that they today have in their house. From whichever part of the world you come, you may have had or still have a favorite toy, a favorite piece of clothing, you have maybe written a diary. So these are actually very universal human stories that anybody in the world can relate to. The stories about love, stories about support, about loss, about grieving. These are very universal stories. So our exhibition showcases 50 personal objects, our permanent exhibition, but we have more than 5,000 objects from more than 15 different conflict and post-conflict zones in the world. So the museum kind of grew from Sarajevo, from the book. But as soon as it opened, we expanded our research activities into different conflict and post-conflict zones in the world. In the permanent space, we display around 50 personal stories, a bit more objects than that. And once a year, we rotate the exhibition. And it always consists out of 44 personal objects and stories from Bosnia and Herzegovina, from different cities, and then 6 international objects, which are presented in one part of the exhibition. We also have in our collection more than 300 hours of video testimonies, which are a part of oral history project that we are continuously doing. So the vision of the War Childhood Museum is to help individuals overcome their past traumatic experiences and prevent traumatization of others, and at the same time advance mutual understanding at the collective level in order to enhance personal and social development. So as such, the War Childhood Museum has expanded, as I said, its activities to contemporary conflict, post-conflict, and resettlement zones, becoming an international platform that gives voices to children anywhere in the world. So we have objects in our collection from the whole region, from Croatia, from Kosovo. We have objects from Ukraine, Syria, Eritrea, Kashmir, Palestine, Afghanistan, and other parts of the world. We have objects from the Second World War, of those who were children during the Second World War here. Apart from presenting the experience of growing up affected by armed conflicts from different perspectives, we have also realized several additional research projects. One of them is on your screens now. So using our methodologies to present the experience of children on the move, for example, through our Childhood en Route exhibition, which presents the experiences of children in different temporary reception centers throughout Bosnia and Herzegovina. We also realized a research project and campaign and created an exhibition called Children in Genocide, and that's what you can see on your screens now. This campaign reached more than 6 million people across all continents, and it was done in the partnership with Srebrenica Memorial Center and Humans of Amsterdam storytelling platform. It has presented the experience of 14 individuals who have survived the genocide in Srebrenica as children. Another one of the projects, exhibition that we did and research that we did was co-created with individuals who have, as children and youth, survived conflict-related sexual violence, and with the children born of war. I believe that Aina Jusic was a part of one of the webinars that you did recently. So her organization was one of the partnering organization in this project, using a body mapping technique. A team of psychologists supported by our team led the survivors through a process of co-creating an exhibition that presented their experience in the form of body maps. So these are just a few examples of research that we did throughout the last few years. Most of our collection consists out of personal items saved by those whose childhoods were or still are affected by armed conflicts, like this one that will be on your screen right now. So this is object from Emina, who was born in 1976, and she named her memory Dress of Spite. I found this dress in an abandoned Sarajevo apartment in 1993. Its bright color flirted with the forbidden, considering that we, as citizens of besieged Sarajevo, were constant targets for the snipers who hid in the surrounding hills. And as people fending for their own lives, dressed in subtle pastel tones, I wore this light, bright blue dress. It was a symbol of defiance and my will to live. So the main strength of personal objects and personal memories in talking about the history lies in their power to create a human connection between the historical event and those who were part of them, and those who are now learning from a different distance, be it a temporal distance, be it a physical distance. It just creates connection. Throughout the process of education, when learning about historical events, children's attention is mainly focused on learning the numbers, years, the statistics, and this approach makes history very abstract, not connected to their own lives. The matter that they are learning is not actualized. It's not something that concerns, quotation mark, concerns them, because it's happening or was happening to someone somewhere who is not me. But with the power of objects to make history tangible and more relatable, history learning becomes a process of making connections, process of developing a well-rounded knowledge, which was acquired in a way that develops empathy and a deeper understanding. So for the children from Bosnia and Herzegovina, museum holds, of course, and from Sarajevo, because it's stationed in Sarajevo, museum holds a special significance in regard to learning about history, about the history of conflict, because when they are at the museum, they are learning about their own family's histories. They are learning about history that is very much still alive in the narratives shared by their parents and other family members. And it's history that's very present still today in any conversation. As Amina said during one of our testings for this webinar, every conversation lasting more than 15 minutes in Sarajevo, there's a joke, will end in talking about war if you were from here. So for the children in Bosnia and Herzegovina, as I said, it has a special significance. The War Childhood Museum represents something personal, something close to home, something that has a potential to deeply affect them, arouse their emotions, start some deep and difficult conversations in their families. This is a potential of the museum, because children from schools, more than 6,000 of them a year, come to our museum, and they will be met with stories similar to ones that maybe they've had the opportunity to discuss with parents, but maybe there wasn't a deeper understanding, or maybe there was a fright from the parents to talk more broadly about the subject. But museum holds different stories from different people, and it can be a good conversation starter in a sense. Okay, we can talk about this topic. I've heard about this other people's experience. So it's a kind of a safer ground to start these conversations and open this topic in general in families. So it can ignite intergenerational dialogue and bring about change. So that's what we hope. Of course, being aware of the complexities of transgenerational trauma, but also being aware of the sensitive nature of this topic in general. We, in all of the aspects of our work, the number one priority is always safeguarding children's well-being. For this reason, we have a number of policies, safeguarding policies that are in place and were carefully created by children's rights experts and other museum staff that are fully in coordination with the Convention on the Rights of the Child of United Nations. And they have the function in making sure we don't traumatize or re-traumatize children in any way, taking into consideration that many of them are also secondarily traumatized, being the children of people who have survived the siege of Sarajevo or the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Some of them are children of those who have survived genocide, and we've had children coming into our exhibition whose parents are now living either in Sarajevo or they came from Srebrenica directly, because we have always have one project running where we can also pay for the buses and tickets for all of the children. So our educational activities are always open to anyone, and we specifically target smaller communities that are far away from the museum. So they will come to the museum and they will be met with these personal stories, and we are aware of how complex and sensitive this topic is, and there are many things that we do to prevent traumatization. For one, there is an info letter for the child, for the parent of the child who is coming, for the teacher. All of them get info letters that will tell them a few information. For kids, like a hello note, we heard you're coming to the museum, and then we approach them with a few questions that are very coming at from a very broad space, inviting them to think about how we all have different lives, even if we're living in the same building or in the same street, we can still have different experiences. Now think about how might life of a child who is maybe today growing up during the war look like. So just to come from a very distant place to kind of tap into that theme in a safer way. And then there are preparation materials that are sent to the teacher, who then does an hour of preparation with our materials at school. And then they come to the museum, and then there is a reflection material that we also send to the teacher, and they do an hour of reflection, 45 minutes of reflection after they go back. And in our museum, there are specific marks of which stories are child-friendly, and this is a marker for the organized educational tours, but especially for the families and children that will visit the museum together, so that they know which stories are okay to read and listen by any participant. So I think I've gone a bit over my time.
Yes, but we have only gained. This sounds like a model museum, not just any museum.
Can I just add one more sentence?
You'll have time later, but go ahead if you must.
I just wanted to say that I work with these children, more than 2,000 of them, very closely a year, and I see how growing up in post-conflict society leaves children with this great burden of dealing with the past that they haven't witnessed. Most of these children have been born after the war, and they are in many cases expected not to confront anything from their community's beliefs and attitudes regarding the war. So children can feel unsupported, not invited to take part in this conversation, overwhelmed, and they can feel helpless when it comes to dealing with this topic, especially if they're coming from a community different than the one that is prevalent in one part of the country, because they are not allowed to question the narrative shared by their family. So this works every way, like Bosniak Serbs, Croats, children are always asked to stay in the official narrative, even if that is genocide denial, even if that is glorifying people who have murdered, killed thousands. So yeah, thank you for listening.
You see, what you see here is the best and most vulnerable part of our center. The truth is that each one of you could have taken not only the whole time, but the whole day, and some more. And
sorry for going over my time.
We may have to find a solution, that, like, for example, do a special meeting at the museum, or of the center at the museum. So start thinking about that. And but each one of you really is a walking illuminator of wisdom. You're filling my heart. And with your permission, Merima, with your permission of the museum, we will put you as a related link on our website. And with your permission, Jamil, tell us how to serve your project on our website. But we can talk about it, of course, later. Meanwhile, we still have the other Amina. We have a first Amina and a last Amina. And a beautiful Amina, Hadjiomirovic. Please, we have eagerly awaited to learn from your wisdom. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me just share.
Yes, of course.
Can you see my presentation?
Yes, it's beautiful.
So, as my colleague said in the beginning, my name is Amina Hadjiomirovic, and I'm a PhD.
Not so fast, darling, because
okay, sorry.
You for the first time. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that. I get it a lot that I speak too fast, so my apologies. I am a PhD student at the School of Global Urban and Social Studies at RMIT University in Melbourne, in Australia, where I am finishing my dissertation in the discipline of sociocultural anthropology on the subject of the sociocultural impact of the unresolved issue of the missing persons from the Bosnian genocide on everyday life, social identities, memories, and migration patterns of the surviving families who were forcibly resettled and are now living in the diaspora. The title of my project is How the Missing Matter: Gaps, Absences, and Silences in Two Diaspora Contexts. So the populations on which I am focused within my PhD are the families of the missing persons that are originating from two distinct localities in Bosnia, that is Srebrenica and Prijedor, who flew two distinct episodes of genocidal violence, and that would be the 1992 so-called ethnic cleansing that happened in Prijedor, which I actually refer to as genocide in my dissertation, and the Srebrenica genocide from 1995. I'm also focused on the experiences of the first and 1.5 generation of survivors, to which I will come later on in my presentation. So within my ethnographic study, I touched upon various topics of the sociocultural impact of the unresolved, or also known as ambiguous loss in the literature, that is the loss that has no closure. I touched upon how it affected the realm of rituals, that is the reinvention of the mortuary and religious rituals, and the biological and social reconstruction of the kinship structures and organization, to the redefinition of the traditional gender roles, norms, and also the shift in the traditional ways of growing up for the children survivors. And the last aspect is what I'm actually going to talk today about in my presentation, and how it connects to actually the transgenerational legacies of the siege of Sarajevo, which I will try to contextualize later on in my presentation. So before I commenced my PhD, I actually graduated at the International University of Sarajevo in the discipline of psychology. And I graduated with my phenomenological study on the impact of transgenerational war trauma on the mental health and development of social identities of the Bosnian post-war generation, to which I belong as well, since I was born in 1996 in July in the central Bosnia. Now, what triggered my interest in the whole subject of the transgenerational trauma, I would say, was my first exposure to my peers who grew up in the Western European countries. And this happened during my Erasmus exchange studies, I think in 2016 or 17. And well, during that experience, and especially after I returned to Bosnia, I sort of had like a clearer vision. And as at the time avid, psychology undergrad, I was sort of starting to pay attention on differences between these two groups in their approaches to life, to environment, and also to the future ahead of us. So my main observations were actually the Bosnian post-generations, in Marianne Hirsch's terms, their low concern with the prospects of future, the general mistrust with the strangers, the foreigners, the inclination to things in dichotomies, and also engagement in these like short-term pleasures, and also uncontrolled or the regular substance use and abuse in everyday lives among my peers. So this is something that I also discussed with them, and this fueled my interest that resulted in me creating this qualitative research study with the Bosnian second generation of survivors from different towns in Bosnia, including Sarajevo. So some of my findings were that the majority of my participants were unaware of the subconscious bias against the other, and also their self-destructive behaviors. Moreover, I noticed that their, and I should say rather our, sense of belongingness, also known as social identity, was rather seemed to be rooted in the us versus them narratives, and this was especially emphasized among the children of the war veterans that actually suffered from untreated PTSD, which is something that my participants told me throughout our in-depth interviews. Moreover, something that I noticed, especially during, I would say, when I was studying the trauma psychology course, and there was a lot of speaking of how one of the integral maladaptive approaches to coping with the PTSD is substance abuse. However, I was perplexed with that because it was so over-present in my environment and also normalized that I never understood it as something that is, as I said, maladaptive or unhealthy when it comes as a part of everyday life. And thus, in this research, I also proposed, I argue that there is a space for the scholars to explore the substance use, the using of the substance abuse behavior that could be also suggestive of these epigenetically acquired existential anxieties and or the mirroring of parental behavior, which is actually rooted in war-related and untreated PTSD. However, this was, as I said, during my studies in the psychology, and within my present research, I told you the topics that I touched in my dissertation. However, within my PhD, I studied the adaptive and maladaptive responses to the intergenerational trauma of genocide and forced displacement among the children of the missing persons. My focus was on the 1.5th generation that is also known as the generation of children survivors, as defined by Susan Suleiman. And this is something, this generation has been kind of like crammed in the same category with the second generation of survivors. And in my dissertation, I also was advocating for a distinction between those generations because they differ in their experience of the familial trauma in terms of their connection, understanding, and also identification with the transgenerational trauma of genocide. Suleiman defined this as, for the second generation of survivors, she attributed the notion of shared experience of belatedness versus the notion of premature bewilderment and helplessness that could be attributable to the 1.5th or the generation of children survivors. So within my research, I was mostly focused on those who were actually children when the genocide and war happened, and that were also children when they were forcibly displaced with mostly their mothers, because majority of the men were killed in the genocide. One of the phenomena that I actually wrote about and published a paper was that of the translocal endogamy, and that refers, this is all a little bit more scholarly, however, compared to my colleagues' stories. However, this is something that I wanted to point out. And translocal endogamy refers to one of the patterns that children survivors originating from the localities that suffered particular episodes of genocidal violence tend to partner up with the children survivors in the diaspora who are originating from the same area. And this is like some of the stable patterns that I noticed in both of my fieldworks in Melbourne in Australia and later in the St. Louis in the United States. I also interpreted this phenomena as positive transformation of the negative predispositions of the transgenerational trauma of genocide, in the sense that it represents a form of survival mechanism for preserving both local and familial rather than ethnic or national continuity in the aftermath of genocide that affected and disintegrated both of these areas. Now, on a more somber side, some of my findings from the St. Louis, where I did my second fieldwork, pertains to the great number of premature deaths of the young Bosnian migrants, and this is mostly due to the substance abuse, overdose, and related accidents. And I noticed this upon my visitation of the Bosnian cemetery, where I noticed a big number of the tombstones that are inscribed with a very short lifespans, and with the pictures of the young Bosnian migrants from all parts of the Bosnia. And later, when I was speaking, of course, with the residents in St. Louis, and for those who are not familiar, St. Louis is an American city that has the largest population of the Bosnian refugees, around 75,000 of them actually, that moved there after the war. So later, when I talked with the community actants and with the parents as well, I found that this rampant problem of substance abuse among the young Bosnian migrants resulted in the St. Louis police establishing Bosnian opioid task force in order to curb deterioration of the social tissue and of the migrant communities. again, when I was speaking with parents, I learned that the possible reasons for this could be actually the unresolved childhood traumas of genocidal violence that was kind of brushed against because there is this popular creed of children will be all right, and most of the attention was actually directed towards the first generation of survivors who were adults and towards the healing of their traumas of the war. Moreover, there is also kind of a trauma of forced displacement and also the absence of parents, both due to the loss, those who went missing and were killed in the war, but also the absence of parents in everyday lives because the primary caregivers were preoccupied with working 2 or 3 shifts in order to provide for their children as a sole provider in the diaspora. Moreover, there is also a refugee stigma that carries the crisis of belongingness for many of the Bosnian youngsters upon a resettlement that usually ended up of them siding with the bad company, as they call it, and eventually starting to engage in the criminal and illicit behavior. Now, to contextualize my findings and what I speak with the topic of this webinar, and that is the intergenerational legacies of the war trauma relative to the siege of Sarajevo. So how these findings might relate to that is that findings that I just discussed and that were derived from my research with the children who survived the siege of Srebrenica also may bear implications for studying those who survived the siege of Sarajevo, considering that the conditions were similar in one way or another. In both of these contexts, children grew up exposed to the terror and human suffering, eventually becoming accustomed to these distressing and horrific realities that became their new normal. Again, considering that these were their formative years, witnessing to these horrors actually and undeniably affected their ways of perceiving the reality of how it was supposed to look like, and well, in comparison with the normative environments where children are usually growing up. Moreover, in the aftermath of war, many children in all of these local contexts were exposed to a great extent to parental PTSD that usually entails the physical or emotional abuse. Hence, many children found sanctuary in the streets, be it the streets of Sarajevo, of St. Louis, of Melbourne, of Chicago, or wherever they ended up due to the forced displacement, by which actually, for those who are not familiar, around 48% of the Bosnian pre-war population was forcibly resettled after the war. And again, both of these contexts, the Srebrenica and Sarajevo, were actually prolific environment for the culture of crime, substance abuse, and illegal sex work to thrive because of the whole context of reparation and reconstruction after the war. And this captured many children who ended up on the streets. So what I was advocating with my research and what I want to say here that is that we need to drop this slogan of children will be all right and design better social work policies that are relative to the youth in the aftermath of war, and as Merima said, also to take their voice into consideration and give them some agency within the whole context of reconciliation and of like healing in the aftermath of war. So yeah, I think that would be from me. Yeah, I cannot hear you because you are muted.
I'm respectful to you. I would like to add here to recommend strongly that some of you, including you directly, Amina, view many of our webinars up to date about these issues, because that's part of what we are, that's part of what the center is about. And perhaps even more directly, you can find the Danieli inventory from Multigenerational, the Legacies of Trauma, in Bosnian on our website. And perhaps as a postdoctoral study, you will join Amina, the older Amina, I've been, she's the one who did the translation, but we need to get the study done. So I'm strongly decided that even if you get 2 more aminas, please. So we don't just talk in PTSD language, you know, in diagnostic terms, etc., but we talk about actual life terms.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, that is also the reason why I left psychology, because of the whole pathologization, you know, of the human experiences, and I transitioned to sociocultural anthropology, where I'm actually exploring the meaning of experience, and I don't like using those terms, but I didn't really know, is this more of focused, you know, on the, how to say, the quantitative aspect and the, you know, the PTSD realm, or is it more speaking of our experiences?
Absolutely, but in the Danielle inventory, we attempt to exactly do that, to address all the dimensions of human life on a daily basis. So so you don't need to leave feeds; you can simply use it. But so thank you so much, and. I wonder if let's take a moment, as we promised you and the audience. Those of you who want to share your emails, please put it in the chat. I don't feel it's my right to do it in the name of the center, but people are asking to be in touch with you. So please put your emails in the chat if you feel okay about that. And I was wondering if you have questions to each other or comments on each other's presentation. And then we open the floor to questions from the audience. Dear audience members, please put them in the chat so we can attend to your questions or comments. Anyone wants to comment on among you? This is the panelists' dialogue time. Would you like to comment on each other's, or do you feel there's something? Go ahead, Jamil.
This is more of a statement, not a question, but maybe it will go into question. I would like to say something Merima mentioned, and then Amina mentioned it too. The voice of kids, and even today when I get asked, they don't consider me a grown-up man, and I think most of the people are not doing it on purpose. It's not that they don't respect us, but having experienced that on my skin, I worked in media for 20 years with the journalists, and I saw, if they are listening, I can freely say I don't really care now. I'm 40 years old. Never ever did anyone make a story about me or ask me anything about my brother. So I would say, not that I was angry, but the project came out of most probably need. I didn't notice that until I actually started the project, to say something. And then some journalists
to say I'm here.
Yes,
my voice
yes.
matters. Mm-hmm.
But what's really interesting, I would say, even family members, close friends, really good friends, except of course my mom. If it wasn't for my mom, I would end up in statistics of Amina, most probably. The amount of love she gave me and care, I can say I ended up here, and I think I don't have a PhD and I'm a normal functioning adult. But what's really interesting, even today, when they do ask me, they don't ask me, they asked about the project. So it's really shameful how people are, I would say, shallow, and there's so much lack of empathy that is actually scary and humiliating to me and my brother. Because let's say I mention my brother, in a conversation and nobody asked how old was he, what was his name. They just skip to next question and the conversation goes. But if I said my cat died or a truck driver ran over my cat, they would say, really? Oh my God. And that, even in 2023, we have that. And I don't know how do we change that, except that I just ignore them and don't talk to them and don't acknowledge them at all. That's maybe sounded like a rant, but that's my perspective and something I actually experienced. So Merima has something to.
Merima, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I agree.
Wait, Jamil, thank you so much for sharing this, please. And go ahead, Merima.
I just wanted to agree in full with Jamil. I've had similar experience myself. I used to get I would be very much left alone in the grief and the pain when people would, you know, trying to save their own well-being. It's not something that people do on purpose, I think. It's just that they don't know how to deal with so much assumed pain that you or I are holding within. So I think it's mostly subconscious that they are doing it. They don't know what to say, in which way, what questions it's okay to ask and what not. I used to feel so alone. And so, you know, you would say something that is so hurtful for you. You would share your experience. I would share my experience, and then just silence or skipping to another question or another subject, as you said, Jamil, until one time. And I didn't even know what I was feeling. I didn't even recognize how alone in it I felt every time that this happened, because there was no connection to anyone. Nobody would tell me, as you said, what was his name, how old was he when he died. Nobody. It's like every time somebody erased him for a little bit. And then one time I was at this seminar, Sense of Belonging, in Amsterdam. It was last year. And I said that I've lost a brother during the war. And for the first time in my life, somebody asked me very openly, I'm so sorry, what was his name? And I started crying immediately. And that's the first time that I recognized how alone one feels when you know, people are afraid to tap into some string that they shouldn't, and they just don't ask anything. I think even asking a wrong question would be better than just what you explained, Jamil, and I agree totally with you.
Is it Irfan?
No, no, it's not Irfan. My brother was his name was Mirza.
Yes.
He was not minor when he died, but he died at the end of the war when he just turned 21.
Wow.
My condolences. I didn't know.
Thank you.
Yeah, some of you know this book that I published in 1998, the International Handbook on Multigenerational Legacies of Trauma. And at the beginning of it, I write that inasmuch it's difficult, and by the way, my doctoral dissertation, I finally got my doctorate on what I call the conspiracy of silence about the Holocaust, which was exactly, I found 49 ways of not listening to survivors. But with this book, I wrote in particular that not only we are afraid to listen, to look, to learn from survivors, adult survivors, but to think about children is beyond our capacity. It's hard enough, it's very wounding psychologically to think of a suffering of an adult. But to conceive of a suffering of the vulnerable, innocent child is even more difficult. That's why the silly stereotypic beliefs that children don't suffer pain, you know, in medicine, this took centuries to understand that children do suffer pain. And even today, I don't know how much they pay attention to it. And I mean, we already know that they discriminate against children of discriminated people about that issue too, to this day. This is which Amina is leaving. The young Amina is leaving. Well,
I think she left the conversation.
that's not very well. She's the youngest, no? That's too bad. She said she mixed up the time between 6 hours, 7 hours difference. So she is, so she has to go. But that's okay. We are continuing for at least a little bit. So we okay. So yes, this is sort of to tie up what Merima said, that people probably don't mean badly, right? That they don't mean to neglect. They're just afraid. They just run away psychologically.
Yeah.
Very similarly, Jamil, to your psychological reaction to totally negate the war or totally negate life. In the moment of losing your brother, it's as if that was the end of the world. Right? But we do. Maybe that's why we still have so much horribleness in the world, because people keep forgetting that it does exist. They keep running away from it. They keep not learning the impact. They keep not learning the consequences. I wonder if, yeah, it's, this is interesting because part of what we are saying, we're focusing more on the child's experience rather than on the child who was born afterwards, which is fine, absolutely fine. This is exactly right. And Merima, one of the things you didn't mention, you mentioned how the museums tries to heal children, try to heal society, etc., etc. Could you just share with the audience what measures are available for the museum staff? Because of course the staff, as do therapists, as does Jamil, as does Amina, the people who are actually doing the work we're talking about today are all exposed to trauma every time we do our work, right? Could you just share very briefly, because I still want to, of course, attend to the audience. Go ahead.
Yes, of course. The World Childhood Museum, when it opened, it was a team of just a very small team of 5 people working, and then some additional part-time staff that was covering the reception of the visitors to the museum. So it was a very small team, and everyone working at the museum at that time has had the experience of being a child during the war themselves. So we were like 4 or 5 people, full-time employees, which all have the same experience. And it was from the day one that we were aware, of course, that dealing with this topic every day for the rest of, however long we will be working will take its toll. And we didn't start working, going through therapy on the very start, because we needed to see what kind of, of impact will it have when when was it okay for each of the persons to go, because we didn't want from the start to, you know, say you have to go to therapy, because that is also something that one has to decide for themselves, and it's not good to push somebody when they are not ready. So it was always told to us that we have the option, and we had a psychologist, we have a psychological team that was supporting some spheres of our work and going through all of the materials that are relevant to research, to working with the audience, to working with children, to working with the contributors to the collection, and they were there for our team. We had a joint sessions. That was something that everyone had to take part in, because it was not one-on-one. So we would have one every few months, every 3 months, we would gather all together as a team and discuss. This was just when we were starting to work and developing a sense of when and how. And then maybe after a year and a half, we started going individually. This was also around the time when we started working with some more additional research topics, like the genocide in Srebrenica, and then the person who was doing that research with those participants had to have a therapy before and after preparation, and therapy after each of the participants were contributing either through a donation of an object or video testimony. And now we have regular, I've been to therapy for 2.5 years. That was provided by my work. I have a PTSD. I like to say that I'm much better now, but still I get triggered and still I get sad, and that's I guess okay. Yeah, I've been going for 2.5 years, and everyone at work goes on their own pace. Somebody goes once a month, somebody goes regularly every week, but it's up to us to decide when and where, but it's provided by the War Childhood Museum.
Thank you. Jamil, you mentioned your mother's love and embrace. You took on an alone, you charted a lonely search. Who supported you? Who did you let anybody support you?
In the project. So I have only...
It's really almost a mission. You call it a project, but it's almost a mission, isn't it?
It is life mission. I'm just afraid if something happens to me, so much will go with me, God forbid. But I could say I'm alone. There are a few friends who are behind, and they are technical. So editorially or journalistically or whatever you want to call it, I'm sadly alone. I'm in the process of registering this as a foundation. So from there, I'll try to collect some money and pay other people to do stuff instead of me doing everything by myself. I said sadly I'm alone because this is something that government should be doing like 20 years ago, not now, but we lost so much, but it's never late, but lots of people died in the process. So with them, lots of stories and pictures died. So I'm trying to bridge photographers and survivors together. So I have stories from photographers and from kids, from the photos, and sometimes I connect them without me being there. So what they discuss and what they talk is, it's a story for itself. It's a film. It's a life for itself.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
What I noticed, what happens when photographers find kids from photos, they get acknowledged, at least in their mind, that they actually did something. And on top of it, the kid is alive. In my case, it's different. But again, they made me happy because now I have a memory of my brother when he was alive. And most probably in that street, he was playing tennis 2 years before he was killed as well. And we don't know if any other photographer will have him from different parts of the city, because we did go visit my aunts. He went to high school in downtown. So I'm still hopeful to find some other dots and the pieces of my puzzle. If I had money, to be blatantly open, I could actually fasten this and make this more effective by buying these photos and paying people for their services. Because right now I'm in the process of begging, and luckily all these photographers are amazing human beings. They're amazing human beings. They are giving these for free. I mean, they are not charging anything. And if one of you has the one photo, they might ask for money because your project or institutions have commercial value, or you would sell a book. But I'm not commercial, and I'm just collecting these for emotional pleasure. There's no money involved, and maybe that's why people don't support it, or government doesn't see the need to support it. But we'll see.
Yeah, and that's a question that so many NGOs have, non-governmental organizations and independent scholars, including our center. But we all keep going out of a sense of mission and support each other. So we will stay in touch to see how we can support you.
Thank you.
At least one of the photographers who contributed the cover for my book on the 50th anniversary of human rights. No. That was that was a book on, it's called Sharing the Front Line and the Back Hills. It was about the toll taken on everybody who comes to help, including photographers. And the photographer who contributed an image, it was an image of Srebrenica, Ron Haviv. Maybe
Yes.
I'll put you in touch with him. Maybe you're already in touch with him.
We are in touch.
Yes, of course. And he's a child of survivors of the Holocaust.
Yeah.
So he will be a particular friend to you.
Yeah.
But among us, maybe we can continue this dialogue. So it should be, absolutely. And certainly we should provide support for each other. So that's the most important. So we can continue this conversation. Vedrana, you have been very active. Are you still here? Rabbi, could you open Vedrana's? Vedrana, would you like to say several things? You have been.
Sure, I can. I have a few minutes. By the way, I first want to say thank you, everybody. This is a very emotional topic for me even now. I'm from Banja Luka. But I just want to say thank you. I mean, I feel like we just scratched the surface. This can go. I mean, for me, it's harder now what's happening because I have a 3-year-old daughter, and looking at the conflict in Ukraine and refugees, and I'm seeing it through the eyes of my daughter, like trying to imagine now being a refugee. So it's almost like this trauma is like 30 years later happening. I was also a child during the war, so I really appreciate you doing this. I'm sorry, it's very difficult.
Don't be sorry. I started this webinar crying, and I'm still crying. Don't.
And I met you, Dr. Danieli, a few years ago. I don't know if you remember. We briefly spoke at the Bosnian Film Festival in New York City, and it was a similar topic. There was a panel discussing, after the fact, and the whole thing about denying genocide, what's happening, and teaching different versions of history.
Yes.
So those are things I really appreciate what you're doing with your organizations and the other panelists, what they're doing, because we need to keep doing this and bring the truth out, because otherwise there is no peace, there is no healing.
Yeah, thank you, Ravana, for sharing with us in the chat.
Thank you.
You
Ravana.
also mentioned that the young Amina's presentation opened your eyes to the suffering of those who went into who fled to the diaspora, as if there's a way to run away from
Exactly.
the trauma physically.
Yeah, that is something that, quite honestly, I wasn't even thinking about, but
Exactly.
it's
It's
very
the
true.
same
And
as
it's a
what we
whole
talk-
different issue.
Yes. And what we did when we used the Danieli inventory to compare children of survivors of the Holocaust in Israel, which people experience as a homeland, and comparing them with children of survivors in the diaspora, even if in the diaspora in North America, people were wealthier, had more money, etc. The children in Israel felt better and had less. So things are so much more complex than we can ever touch upon, even just touch upon in one webinar. But in creating the body of webinars, and all of you should know that our webinars are being taught in schools all over the world. So your voice is not even only in this room, right? You're teaching others, and hopefully we are also supporting so many others who are suffering today and feel all alone and feel abandoned and feel totally forlorn. And perhaps we can even, my big dream is that our webinars will be taught in schools for politicians. And decision makers and in law schools, so they can learn too about the impact of their decisions. But we will continue. I don't know yet how, but we will stay in touch, writing to each other how to continue next. That is how we go from webinar to webinar. And I wonder if Amina, Merima first, Jamil second, Amina Durakovic last, your last word to the kind audience of this webinar. Merima, and unmute yourself.
Can you just repeat the question? Can I recount?
No,
What?
just last words, just for today. Message
Yes.
would you like to leave this generous audience?
I would like for everyone to, when you are reading scholarly articles and reading statistics, numbers, to every time when you are reading that, pinch yourself and tell yourself, these are real people behind these numbers. Each of them has a face or had a face, identity, and they were loved by somebody, and not to get submerged into the topic solely as scholars, but first as human beings.
Jamil, please.
Just to say something maybe I didn't mention regarding the project, and maybe I should mention that more often. Please visit the website and visit some of the galleries, and I don't want to say, but if you want to see how the project was launched, you can read my story, but the gallery is
And did you put it on did you put it in the chat? Did you put your website in the chat?
It was in a presentation, but I'll put it in a chat as well, because what I noticed many times, not once, that people would find a photo of their loved ones or of them or of themselves 1 year or 2 years after I actually published it on the website. So they would only find it once I share it on, let's say, Instagram or Twitter. So I'm pretty sure there are many, many photographs that of people that they are not aware of. So if you have time and if you are, I try not to publish grim photos, massacre photos. It's 95% of children. So there is safety concern there. So you can go and you might be triggered by the clothes and the looks of the city and kids, but I don't find them that traumatic. I find them triumphal.
Validating.
Yes. So that's my, instead of me talking, like I would just say pictures, one picture is 1,000 words, and I have thousands pictures uploaded.
And by now you have so many thousands of words in pictures. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Amina.
I'm so sorry, first of all, for not showing my face, because my
your connection, don't go away.
internet connection is
Oh.
and for the facts, and that the language matters. Language is really important, and I feel like I'm going into
We're losing
battle, and that I talk about the aggression against Bosnia and Herzegovina, genocide, and siege of Sarajevo. It is really exhausting, but it is something that I feel to do. Yes, we have to fight for the truth at all costs.
Yeah, and that's why you are on our advisory council.
Yeah.
I don't have enough words to thank you. This has been a profoundly important webinar. And the biggest thanks is to say, let's continue. And take good care of yourselves, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yael. Thank you very much. And thank you to the audience who was with us.
Thank you. Love you.